So I found out that I was going to have my first match, and this was in late January 2009. And they gave me about 5 days' notice. And they said, hey, we're going to have a live event on Saturday. It was at this shady flea market. This place was sketchy, but they had all kind of dope weapons and stuff. I bought this really cool taser and like this knife, and it was like a bat boomerang with both ends sharpened. They had really dope stuff. But anyway, it was at this sketchy flea market. It was outside, and I was going to be wrestling Justin Gabriel for my first ever match. And I was nervous. I was super nervous because they hadn't really taught me anything yet. Like, I could do headlock takeovers, standing wrist locks, hammer locks. I could do body slams. I didn't have a finisher. I didn't have a comeback. And I was a babyface. But okay, here's the thing. They wanted to rush me, and I wanted to, be able to perform and be on the stage. But at the same time, I needed to learn. I wanted to feel confident and comfortable in everything that I was doing. And that's just something that, it was a theme that I always had to battle in this, because they don't really teach you things. And coming from academia, you expect they will, but, this is pro wrestling, which I learned to adapt to. But anyway, I could not have had a better first opponent or first partner for my first wrestling match than Justin Gabriel. That's something that bonded us. And I remember at the time, him telling me, PJ, I always call him PJ, he's gonna be PJ to me forever. But PJ was telling me, hey, brother, I'm gonna have your first wrestling match. I'm honored. And he's like, well, we'll always remember that. And I was like, yeah, and you know what? We do. And we're still close to this day. That was my PJ impersonation. But we're still close to this day. We still talk about that every now and then. He'll bring it up. Hey, remember I had your first match? Yeah, I know. And in fact, I had my second match with PJ also. But for my first match, I was nervous, and we ended up wrestling a 10-minute Broadway. And a Broadway is a draw. You run out of time. Because PJ was a babyface also, which also made this wonky for my first match. It was difficult because with a babyface and a heel, it's easy. And the heel is usually the more experienced wrestler, but not always, but they call the match generally. And so that would make it easy for me as a babyface. I needed to be led. And PJ was going to lead me, but he was a babyface. So it just makes it a little bit tricky. But that's how it ended in the Broadway was, we both gave it our all, and we just couldn't score the pinfall in the time. That was the story of it. So the match, it worked. It was good. It was kind of a technical wrestling match. There weren't too many crazy high spots, but it was what it was just for me to get through. And, I remember being happy with it and feeling relieved, and the coaches were happy with it. And it was cool. It was really, really cool. But something I'm always grateful to PJ for, Justin Gabriel. But yeah, man, shout out to PJ. Had my first match. So one of the interesting things I learned quickly about FCW was that in the eyes of the boys there and Steve Kern, this was like an independent wrestling territory. So Steve Kern was making money from the shows, and he obviously wanted to promote it and wanted it to grow and be big. And the boys did too. But what I understood was that wasn't the same aim that WWE had for them. WWE could easily advertise FCW and have, people standing in line to get tickets, but they never did, because that wasn't the point of it. For WWE, FCW was like a black ops site, like off the grid, where they could send superstars and talent from the main roster to go down to FCW and work on things. They didn't want this to be widely known because they wanted talent to go, practice or reinvent themselves or try a different character that might not work. And so this is how you do it. It's like a comedian who tries out new material somewhere. They don't do it on, a national stage. They go to some little small towns and try it in a little dive bar. That's like what this was. We were in, parking lots and flea markets and armories and high school gymnasiums, just trying out new stuff. And that was the point of FCW. And that's why I had an alter ego in FCW. I had the character Dawson Alexander. And I came up with Dawson Alexander because I wanted him to have the initials DA. And so Dawson Alexander. And he was playing off my lawyer persona, obviously. And I came up with my finisher, The Verdict, which I ended up taking with me to the main roster. Shout out to Norman Smiley for helping me, with the name on that. But it was basically the Farouk Spinebuster. So also shout out to Ron Simmons, one of my wrestling heroes. But I came up with that in FCW because the character that you have in FCW isn't necessarily going to be the one that you have on the main roster in WWE. So I created Dawson Alexander to kind of experiment with things and to fail at FCW. So then David Otunga in WWE could succeed because he didn't fail where Dawson Alexander did. He'd already learned those things. And now David Otunga was different. I spent every weekend in FCW traveling all around Florida for house shows, live events, and it was actually pretty fun. It was low stress. It was a fun time in my life, and everything was low key. But the thing that I was forgetting was I wasn't just an FCW wrestler. I was Punk from I Love New York too. And that show was really popular back at this time. And so I was really well known, and I would have people at the events just screaming out all the time, Punk, Punk, I love New York. Do you have love for New York? You still love New York? So, and I was really recognizable. So I won't say that it was difficult, but it just was a unique aspect that was added to that. Not to mention my fiance at the time was really well known too, Jennifer Hudson. And so she would travel with me, and it would just be her and I going to shows, and she was pregnant with my son at the time. And so it's just our little family, like this is what we would do on the weekends. And it would be wild because, you could be in the Orlando Armory and you'd see Punk from I Love New York 2 wrestling, and Jennifer Hudson sitting right there in some sunglasses, pregnant, just watching, trying to be low key. And then, not to mention, you had future WWE champions in the ring, Drew McIntyre, Sheamus. But this is what was going on at that time. Just was a really unique time and really cool, super fun memories. So every week we would have promo class on Wednesdays, and then Thursdays we would have FCW TV tapings. Now, the interesting thing about my time in FCW is that they didn't really let me have a lot of matches. This is weird because you would think I would just be having matches left and right, as many as I could to get me ready for the main roster because they were trying to rush me. But they didn't. It was like they'd always find reasons. Otunga doesn't need to have a match. He can come out and cut a promo or something, but it was just weird. So it took a while before I finally got my first match on FCW TV. And then I had it, and I was super happy just to have that and finally debut on there. But even after I debuted on FCW TV, I would only have matches on there sporadically, which just was weird to me. But I remember the most times I appeared on FCW TV was after I was already on the main roster or in the Nexus. Now all of a sudden they want to put me on for ratings. Oh yeah, we have the A-list David Otunga here. Man, you guys could have. I was here every week just watching. But FCW TV, it was cool, and it ended up that's what NXT evolved into. But NXT as it is today first was a TV show on Sci-Fi, and I helped bring in that inaugural season. And so I'm going to talk about that next and just how wild my NXT call-up was.